All right, and we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our March webinar, where we'll be focusing today on enabling collaboration in the engineering and construction industries. So my name is Peter Hawker. I'm one of the product managers here at PDFTron, and my background, though, is actually in electrical engineering. And here at PDFTron, though, I focus on our architecture, engineering, or AEC product offerings. I'm also joined by Aaron Gravesdale, our head of solution engineering.
Hello.
And to talk a little bit about how WebViewer can be used to enable different workflows in the AEC industries. We're going to structure the talk today to discuss some of the new features that are available in our most recent release of WebViewer, including our WebViewer collaboration platform. And then I'll hand things off to Aaron to cover some of our existing AEC focus features. Before we get started on features, though, let's just go over some quick housekeeping notes. There's a questions tab, I think, on the right-hand side of your screen where you can ask questions during the webinar, but we'll also try to keep some time at the end for a Q&A. There's also a chat panel where we can have discussions, and we'll try to answer things throughout the session there as well. We'll be running a few polls, so keep an eye out for those. And finally, the session is going to be recorded in case you need to drop off early, and you can always refer back to it after as well. But let's jump into it. So the first thing I wanted to highlight today is our WebViewer collaboration product. Let me share a screen here. There we go. So this is available to anyone with a WebViewer license, and we recently announced our second big release with many different improvements. The whole goal with WebViewer collaboration was trying to build out a set of plug-and-play modules that you can enable real-time collaboration within your existing product and get up to speed really quickly. You can hook up to any database that you have right now, but we also have a lot of defaults or examples that you can use. And we included all sorts of things from authentication to notifications to get you up to speed with a lot of those common features right out of the box. One of the big things we wanted to do, though, is enable collaboration really quickly. So the goal was to do it in less than 50 lines of code, as you can see here. Just quickly running through a few of the features. Like I mentioned, it's database agnostic, so you can either use your existing database or some of the examples that we put together. The big feature of collaboration, though, of course, is real-time syncing of annotations. So rather than checking a document in and out when you're in there commenting and reviewing a drawing, perhaps, and you can actually see the work that someone else is doing, and everyone can work in the document at the same time. And this scales up really well for dozens of users. It also plugs right into your existing authentication system or single sign-on. We have mention and notification support, both via email or via browser notifications. And these events are all pop up and are available too in case you have your own notification system that you'd like to use instead. There's incredibly robust permissions, so you can really fine-tune what users can do, whether they can view, edit, write annotations, comment on each other's annotations or only their own. And one of the new things we came out with in the second version is our second release of the collaboration platform is a versioning system too. So a history of the annotations. This can be really important in maybe a markup consolidation workflow, where the very first version of all those annotations is really important, even though the annotation may be changed and consolidated as the workflow goes on. Now, let's do a quick demonstration, though. So I'm going to hop into this document here, and this is available on our WebViewer demo showcase. So I can see that I'm called, I think, Constantine here, so I'm on page 2, and I can also see Aaron is in here as well, shown up as Wilburn in our demo. But let's say I need to get Aaron to look at something. So I can add a little mention to him. Who's this? It could be all caps. And he'll get a notification on his side or an email, depending on how we have it set up, that this needs his attention. He can come back in here and perhaps respond to me or add his comment, whatever it might be. So here we go. Looks like he's responded. So we also have support for unread notifications too. So you can see this is highlighted. So if I've actually left the document and come back later, it's going to highlight all the changes that have been made since the last time. And here's a new annotation. Looks like he's making down the bottom. Let's see what he said here though. Let's keep this one as it is. Okay, sounds good to me. We also have support, of course, for annotation statuses, which is really important and useful in review and approval workflows, just to track what's been reviewed, what hasn't been approved. So I'm going to accept his comment here. And let's see, what did he say down here? So I got a notification, if you heard it on the side there, that good point, we should review. So you'll also see we have threaded conversations as well, just to make it a little bit easier when we have multiple people in the same document. A few of the other neat things that we talked about is, so you can see this annotation feed on the left-hand side. So every time there's a change, that event is available, so you can integrate and use that in all sorts of different ways within your own product. And yeah, so I think moving on from collaboration, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on when I joined PDFTron was refining some of the existing AAC features that we already had. And the first target for this is our measurement tool set. So as I'm sure many of you know, we have extensive measurement features available within WebViewer out of the box. And we'll have more to showcase on what we're working on in the future here, including a big overhaul of how we're handling scale in drawings. But I'd like to show off a few of the smaller things that we're working on right now. So the first one here is an improvement to how we handle snap to content. Now, when measuring a drawing, what points you're measuring between can be really important. To help identify this, we've added visual indications. Let me zoom in here a little bit, see if we can see it better. So this is similar to what you might be, and this might be too small to see. I hope you can see it okay. But this is similar to what you might expect in a CAD program, where a midpoint is shown by a triangle. We have endpoints shown as a square. An intersection shows up as an X, and then just a point on line shows up as a circle. And this is so important to know. I mean, what's the point of a measurement if it's not precise? And that precision and knowing exactly what point I'm snapping to is something we really wanted to showcase here. So as you can see, this is actively in development, but we're expecting this should be available in our next release. Another small refinement that we've made as well is the addition of lead lines to our distance measurement tool. So sometimes we were finding that with our distance measurement, we could obscure the content. So if I'm measuring from wall to wall here, our measurement would actually go across maybe the text or the caption that's already on there. So we've added default support for lead lines with the ability, of course, to extend or move around and rotate. So not a big change, but more, again, just a refinement. Yeah. Now, these are just a handful of the small refinements we're working on in addition to larger overall features. And we'll have a poll in a few minutes so we can solicit some feedback on what else you'd like us to focus on in the future. The last new feature that I really wanted to talk about is PDF editing. So, I mean, of course, this isn't specific to the architecture, engineering, maybe construction industries, but how often have you found yourself at the end of maybe an approval workflow where everything is ready to go, but then you notice that the date on a report or maybe a page number is wrong? This leads to the delays. The document needs to be re-PDF from the native document after the changes are made, and then the workflow has to start over from scratch, and the report gets out late, or at the end of the day. It always happens on Fridays, I find. Well, now with WebViewer, you can actually edit the PDF file directly in the browser. So looking at my example here, let's say, I don't know, I noticed that, so I'm in edit mode. This is a specific mode we've added to WebViewer. I mean, obviously not something we want to have happen by accident. You'll see these bounding boxes have been added around some of the content. So let's say instead of Adam, I realize he actually produced the last report and I was the author on this report. So I can actually open this content up, update it, and you'll see the document will reflow and change directly in the PDF. Or let's say it's a small thing. Maybe it's this actually was supposed to be page number 1 and it didn't get changed, and I need to make sure that that gets fixed. Rather than going all the way back to Word or whatever the native document is, I can change that here directly in the PDF. You can also do, I can move content around, as you can see. I can even change, maybe this was, maybe this was supposed to be 1 column, not 2 columns. And then I can do that as well. Now, this is the very first release we've done of this PDF editing, and we have a lot more changes planned in the future. Being able to edit, remove, delete images, better rich text support as well. And I never believed that this actually works, so let me just download this PDF and open it up to show that this content has actually changed. There it is. I'm now the author of the report. Sorry, Adam. And there's our page 1, and here's our reflowed content as well. Okay, so that's actually everything I wanted to showcase for new features right now. I'm looking forward to announcing a lot more stuff soon, so keep an eye out for our upcoming webinars. We try to do one of these every month. But let me pass things off to Aaron now so we can discuss some of the other ways that PDFTron and WebViewer can enable collaboration in your workflows. All right, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Peter. Very, very cool stuff. So yeah, very excited about all of those features. So in my section of this this webinar today, I'm going to sort of go through some of the existing features that we have and sort of paying attention specifically to how they fit into different AEC workflows. So I'm just going to kind of demonstrate these in WebViewer, but a lot of these same features are available through PDFTron SDK as well. So just a bit of knowledge reset there. So we first started developing our toolkit around the late 90s, really around the time the PDF specification was first published. And so our initial offering is PDFTron SDK, which is a toolkit we continue to still offer. It's a code base we wrote in C++, and then ported over to different native platforms like Windows and Linux and Mac, but also mobile platforms as well, like iOS and Android. And what we did a few years back was compile that code over to JavaScript and WebAssembly so that we can run it entirely inside of the browser. And so that's what I'll be sort of demoing here today. But just as Peter was doing. This technology also can be downloaded and tried out in your own environment as well. So we have download links for all of our toolkits, as well as detailed guides walking through different scenarios and how to get things set up. And we'll kind of go into this in a bit more detail in a little bit, kind of covering some of the different frameworks and stuff that we offer. But what my focus is going to be is, just like in Peter's presentation, our WebViewer demo and kind of showing off some of the different features that we have available. So the first thing I'm really going to cover is the rendering provided here inside of WebViewer. So as I mentioned, we developed our toolkit ourselves from scratch. And this rendering here is from our own code base. And the rendering is happening inside of the browser here. So when I'm viewing documents and loading them up here in WebViewer, it's essentially a client-side experience. It's kind of similar to maybe back in the olden days when there were things like browser plugins that browser supported, where you could plug in additional functionality and expand out the ability to run programs in the browser or view documents in the browser. And essentially what we're providing is kind of very similar functionality, but in pure JavaScript and WebAssembly. So as browsers start to deprecate that functionality, you can still continue to view documents within a browser without having to really install anything client-side or open up any new programs or download files to one's local desktop. Rather, all of that is taken care of here inside of the browser. So it's a much easier kind of setup for end users because they're just opening a web page instead of running an installer. And when it comes to the rendering as well, because we're performing the rendering here within the client-side JavaScript code, we can get very detailed rendering even when we zoom way in. So because this text is made up ultimately of vector information, so essentially the mathematical information of how this should be drawn, that means that we can zoom very far in and still get a sharp rendering of the content. And that's the sort of thing that wouldn't really be possible if we were, say, converting to an image server side and then sending that image down to the browser to render. So it's a much richer experience for end users because the content stays sharp even when they need to see fine-grained details, and it's a much more performant experience as well. So as I zoom or as I scroll through the document, it's able to render these pages right away, not having to do a kind of round trip back to the server. And when we get to more complex content as well, especially the kinds seen in AEC contexts, that additional rendering power can really have a big impact on what it's like for the end user. And one of the ways that shows up is through optional content groups or layers that we see in many CAD documents. So here we have an example document where we have a drawing of a building. And within that we have different data around equipment or electrical information, HVAC, plumbing information, and so on. And so this, for many users, might be just too much information. It's really hard to see which part of the document pertains to different parts of the building. And if I were, for example, a plumber going into a building and wanting to do some repair of some of the plumbing there, I might want to get rid of some of this information here from my view, just to kind of simplify things and make my job a lot easier. And by being able to toggle off these optional content groups, these layers inside of the PDF, we get a much simpler rendering. If I were just curious about this building and where the plumbing was located in it, I could see that information right away without having to find it amongst the jumble of other information. So this can really help make for a smoother kind of work experience for end users. And by performing the rendering here on the client side, I can toggle off those layers and see the new rendering immediately. Another thing that really has a big impact on users in the AEC space is the fact that we're able to comply with the PDF specification. And since we wrote the code ourselves, if there are any issues with the rendering, we can go back and correct those. And one of the ways that shows up is, for example, an edge case in the PDF specification on how zero width lines are rendered. So if inside of a PDF document I describe a line as being rendered zero width, then that should remain 1 pixel wide when rendered. So when I zoom into it, it should remain a constant size. And that really has an impact on, for example, the measurement tools that Peter was showing earlier. If I'm measuring something and it's the wrong width, then that could have impacts on how things are constructed in the real world. And if different parts of the construction crew, say like the contractors and different subcontractors, if they're using different rendering engines, they might render the same document in different ways, and something might be built that's incompatible with other things that are built, or they might be outside of regulation, or just otherwise require the rebuilding of something on a job site. And that can have big impacts in terms of cost, of course. There could be mistakes on the job site that maybe go through to the actual, after construction, and maybe lead to structural weakness or some other issues that might incur liability. So it's very important that all of this is built correctly, and in order to do so, everybody has to be working off of the same plans. And so this consistent rendering cross-platform really enables that and allows everyone to build things exactly the same way and to be completely on the same page. Now, what I've shown so far is PDF rendering, but besides rendering PDF documents, we can render quite a few other file types as well. I think the most important one for this presentation, besides Office files and image files, is our ability to show CAD files as well. So what we have is a CAD conversion library that resides on our server side component. So using PDFTron SDK server side, or using our WebViewer server Docker component, either of those tools enable our users to convert CAD files into PDF server-side and then show the PDF copy here in the client-side browser. So currently we have support for DWG, DGN, DXF, I believe. I can actually get to the full listing of that here in our guides. So under what is Web Viewer, if I go to File, Format Support, and then I scroll down to CAD, then I can see a full listing of everything that we support. So yeah, DWG, DWF, DXF, DGN, and as well, we have support for Revit files. What we do is convert Revit files, which are 3D, into a kind of 2D view, very similar to printing the Revit file. And that way we can show it here inside of the client-side browser, and the user is able to consume that content, and just as they would any PDF copy of the content. Now, another kind of scenario where it might be difficult to view content with just the default file is when we might deal with scans or faxes. So it's not uncommon for people to share drawings or share plans by simply scanning them in, or maybe snapping a photo of the drawing with a camera, or a mobile device camera, something like that. And so that results in an image copy of a document. Or there might be a more text-based document like a bill of materials, or other sort of text-based file. And if you're just dealing with an image version of that document, the experience could be quite a lot less smooth than it might be with a born digital file. So here we have a lease agreement, just as an example, and it's purely made of image content. We see that if I'm hovering my mouse over it, and I'm not able to select any of this text because under the hood in the side of this PDF document, this page is comprised just of a single image here on the page. There's no text content built into it because presumably it's been faxed and just immediately turned into a PDF. With PDFTron, though, we have OCR capabilities server-side through our PDFTron SDK. So what you can do is take a document that might be image-based and send that up to a server. And there, leveraging PDFTron SDK, you can send this document either in image form or in PDF form through our OCR technology. And what that will do is detect the text on the page and reconstruct it. And actually make a new PDF copy out of it. And that's actually what we're showing here after that refresh. What happened was WebViewer reloaded the document, and now the document has text information on top of that image. So this is invisible, selectable text on top of that original image view. So that means that it's very similar to working with an actual born digital kind of PDF copy. So for example, I've been able to select text here. I can do things like search for text. So if I search for the word "the," we can see that it can show up throughout the document. And here I can actually make annotations on top of the file as well. So after I've selected the text here, I can go in and make an annotation just as I would with a born digital PDF copy. And so that means that I can perform the same kinds of workflows that I would otherwise do. Here also we have the extracted text from this file. So that means that if I have like a search index of important documents for a particular job, even if the original copy is a scan or a fax, I can still extract that text and feed it into that index. And that way, an end user can kind of search across that full set of documents all at once and be able to find the content that they need. Now, another way to sort of make the overall experience a bit smoother and more intuitive for end users is through UI customization. So WebViewer is actually quite a customizable toolkit, and that can really make a big difference in how easy it is to use for a lot of different users. So there are many users who are not necessarily so tech savvy and might not have much background in using various computer interfaces or tablets or other devices. They might be a bit technophobic, kind of, if you forgive the term, but maybe just are a bit hesitant to learn a new user interface. And for those users who are not uncommon in the construction and in industry, for those users, having a very simple interface is a big deal. That can really have a big impact on whether they're able to learn this interface and be productive within it. So we've really crafted WebViewer to be as customizable as possible with that in mind. So being able to address those sorts of users and tailor things exactly for them. So we have a few different ways of customizing WebViewer's interface. Probably the easiest is through our high-level APIs. So we have just very simple APIs for disabling various elements on a given WebViewer instance. So things like toggling a dark theme off and on. If we wanted to remove different annotation tools, as I was mentioning, so maybe just slimming these down to kind of the bare minimum that someone might want. So just certain tools, maybe just a rectangle and a freehand and a highlight, and that way it's many fewer buttons and many fewer choices that have to be made for a user. Rather, they're just guided to exactly the tools that they need to get the job done. We can also turn off some different features in the UI here as well. So if we wanted to remove text selection or printing or downloading, just to kind of lock down the content a bit more, that's something that's very easy to do. And in terms of how we invoke these, this code snippet here kind of shows that off a bit. So at a low level, if you're not that familiar with JavaScript or how to invoke WebViewer on a page, what this snippet of code is doing is showing how to bring up WebViewer, how to instantiate it, and then how to configure it. So after the WebViewer object has been created on a web page, we can go through and disable certain things. And these APIs make it quite easy to disable these discrete buttons, or if we wanted to turn off some of these panels, like say the thumbnail panel here or the commenting panel here, those also are quite easy to remove, or the page number, or things like that. So yeah, this is all highly customizable. Notice also that we're running this configuration code within the client-side web page. So essentially, after we've loaded up the WebViewer element on this client-side page, then this code that could be added after WebViewer is instantiated is specific to this browser here. So the reason that's important is that means that we can customize the UI on a user-by-user basis. And this is very common in AEC workflows, that some users might need one particular interface, and some users, maybe an architect, might need many more tools within the user interface. So being able to streamline them for those particular users can really help tailor the interface for them and kind of guide them through what they need to do. And you can actually add on to that a bit through our custom annotation functionality as well. So any of these annotations that we show here, like this highlight annotation or some of the shapes that we have, you can actually make customized versions of each of those. Our guides walk through this in great detail, actually. So here under the annotation guide, if I click on custom annotations, we walk through exactly how to take an existing annotation within our toolkit and create a new one out of it. So it's in this guide, it's how to create a triangle annotation. Let's see if there's a screenshot of it. Here we are. So this is what it ends up looking like. But the goal there is to give you kind of the steps to go through to take one of our built-in annotation tools and provide whatever defaults might make sense for a given user. So for example, what we might have is the ability to draw a rectangle, but then add in maybe custom metadata to that to describe, say, the kind of thing that's being denoted by drawing the shape over it. So, for example, I could go through a document and inside of, let's go back to this blueprint document to maybe make this a little more clear. So earlier we talked about a plumber who might be going on site and kind of viewing this document and maybe looking for issues that might be present inside of this building. So perhaps what they could have then are multiple tools. So you could have one square drawing annotation tool, and that could have custom information embedded within it, saying, this is a piece of equipment that's too near a pipe. And then we might have another kind of annotation tool that says, well, this issue here with a blue rectangle means that there's a leakage here. So it's a bit more of an emergency, and maybe is dealt with by different personnel. So by being able to customize the annotations, we can simplify the workflow for users, kind of automating some of the more mundane things they might have to do, like alerting different users about particular issues, or consolidating issue lists for a report or something like that. Instead, by simply marking things with different kinds of annotations tailored just for them, that kind of automation and consolidation can be done automatically. And as we saw previously in Peter's presentation, the annotation states are built into that kind of workflow. So we provide this set of annotation states because that's what the PDF specification says to provide by default. But these can actually be customized on a per annotation basis. So if you had a particular workflow that should be followed after just making that annotation, like if it should go to different users, or if different states should be followed, like maybe there should be a state here where we alert the building management, and then it has to be assigned to another particular person, and then they have to verify that it's there, and then it might go to somebody else to fix it, and then maybe another party to verify that change, or maybe someone from the city has to come down and double check that. And all of those different states could be kind of encoded into the workflow here, and again on a per annotation kind of basis. So it's almost like you can encode the workflow for each kind of task that a user should perform directly in these annotation states, and because of that, enable users to kind of guide themselves through whatever workflow you'd like them to follow in their day-to-day job. It's a very powerful mechanism that kind of builds on this annotation and collaboration infrastructure that we have built into WebViewer. Now, besides this method of UI customization, of using these high-level APIs to do things like turn different buttons on or create new kinds of annotations that show up in the toolbar, we have other kinds of customizations within WebViewer as well. So one of the most important ones is that we actually have published our full UI source code to GitHub. It's React-based JavaScript code, and it's there available for you to download and try out, or to fork the code and make your own version of the UI. So if you have WebViewer license, then you can always take and reskin anything about this interface. So if there's something about how the pages are displayed, or anything about this existing user interface that you'd like to change around and tailor for different users, maybe provide a sort of document dropdown for them to cycle through a set of documents. All of that would be possible. You can really change anything about this user interface and skin it for your own usage. And then yet another way you can customize the interface is by leveraging WebViewer within an existing interface that you might have. So it's not uncommon for customers to come to us, after years maybe of being in business, and they may have developed a document viewer that their users are quite used to. To sort of show that off, we have just this flipbook sample here. So this is an open source flipbook sample that we got a hold of. We didn't develop this ourselves, but we are leveraging WebViewer within this sample. So what we did was we loaded up WebViewer and leveraged it headlessly. So without that user interface, just taking advantage of its lower level functionality and capability to convert a PDF document into an image. And so what we're doing is going through each of the PDF pages, converting those to images, and then showing them in this flipbook view here. So that way, if you had a user or a set of users who were very used to a particular interface and would be very confused by any of that changing, you can still provide that same exact experience to them, but take advantage of WebViewer's rendering under the hood. So you can have that same consistent rendering cross-platform that all other users are taking advantage of, very accurate rendering and performance since it's in the client-side browser, and the ability to take advantage of WebViewer's capabilities for modifying PDF documents under the hood, so enabling signing and redaction and all kinds of other workflows. So you can kind of give them these additional capabilities without having to confuse them by migrating them to some new user interface. So these three methods of customizing the user interface, either through high-level APIs or through changing the source code that we have available on GitHub, or by simply leveraging WebViewer's toolkit within a third-party UI. All of these are different ways that you can provide WebViewer functionality to users and without having to say overwhelm or disorient them. So this could be a very useful way of getting onboarded as well, and making that transition to PDFTron a bit more seamless. So earlier we kind of talked about some different ways of dealing with scans or faxes. So when we have image-based PDF documents, we can do things like OCR them. In WebViewer, we also have the ability to add forms onto an existing PDF. So if you wanted to add new form fields onto a form that was scanned in, that would be possible. But another sort of way we have of working with these kinds of documents and making that workflow a bit easier is by performing comparison of different versions of documents. So we have actually a few different ways of viewing documents that might have changed slightly. So one of these is by kind of overlaying two different versions of the same document. So this would come up in practice where maybe you have one version of a drawing that everyone is working off of, and then maybe the architect, based on regulatory feedback or feedback from whoever is funding the construction project, might add things onto the drawing, might revise, based on that new information, come up with a new version of the drawing, and then send that out to everyone involved in the construction project. And that kind of process can be a bit of a risky one, because if everyone isn't on the same page, as we described before when talking about PDFTron's rendering and the ability to correctly render zero-width lines, if people are working off of different plans, then incorrect things might be built, and then there might be disputes about how to rectify that, and who should weather that cost. So getting everyone on the same page and making sure that they're all on the latest blueprint or drawing is very important. And someone in the field, just given this very detailed blueprint or drawing, isn't necessarily going to be able to immediately spot where the changes are between the latest version and whatever version they happen to be using. So comparison can really save a lot of time with respect to that. So instead of them having to look at every single detail inside of the document, or sometimes we hear about end users printing out the drawings and then placing them on top of each other and then sort of holding that up against a bright light to try to see what's different. This experience here lets us kind of take care of all of that immediately within the viewer. So we have a few different ways of performing comparisons of different versions of documents. This one here is actually made by taking two different PDF copies and composing a new PDF copy out of that, sort of the diff PDF copy. So I could actually download this file, for example, that's made of these two documents laid over each other. What this diff is showing me is what's changed between these two versions. And specifically, we've had some information that's been removed. So previously, we had this deck here, and that's been removed from the latest version. And to show that that's been removed, we're highlighting that in red. And this is happening through PDF blend modes in this case. We have another sample as well that maybe is a bit more flexible when dealing with scans and faxes. So what I'm going to do is kind of bring that up in our WebViewer samples here. This is just another sort of showcase of our functionality here in these samples. And what we have in this demo is a slightly different way of kind of performing the same operation of overlaying two PDF files and seeing what's different between them. This one is a little more suited to scans and faxes because we have a bit more control. How it's working is that we're bringing up three different instances of WebViewer and then bringing up three different documents inside of it. So here on the left, we have the old version of the document that we're working with. Here, it's more of a text-based file, but the same principles apply. And in the right, we have the new version of the file. So that's the very latest copy. And then in the middle here, what we're showing is a pixel by pixel comparison that has been actually composed here inside of the browser. So the browser is taking these two images from WebViewer and the code in this sample is going through those pixel by pixel and outputting this diff sample here. So any content that's been added in the latest version shows up as blue, and any content that was removed shows up as red. We actually have callbacks inside of this sample, so you can customize that, maybe adjusting the pixel difference threshold or the output colors if you'd like to change those to maybe be a bit easier to see. Some of those we've actually added into this sample here. So currently I'm set up to show the differences, but if I turn that off, we see that it's now sort of just back to a black and white view composed of the pixels of each document merged together. And some users actually really like the ability to change the opacity of what's different rather than show that by color. So this is one way of kind of enabling that. I could slide the opacity back and forth, and I'd see what's changed. So what was removed and what was added. It makes it very easy to see by that movement. And that's a bit easier, of course, for anybody who might be colorblind or otherwise visually impaired. We have some other controls within this sample as well that are tailored for the AEC space. So one of those is this sort of nudge tool that we have here in the middle. And again, as I was mentioning before, a lot of these use cases are designed around the cases where new versions of the document come in through scan or fax. And in a lot of those cases, the new version might not be perfectly aligned with the old version. So it might be slightly larger, or maybe when somebody scanned it in, it was a little rotated or translated differently. And so with this tool here in the middle panel, what I can do is make fine-grained adjustments to this overlay. So if the fax is rotated, I can make those adjustments, or if it's just a few pixels off, maybe in comparison, I can change that translation and make sure everything's nicely aligned. Or I can adjust the scale here as well. So if one is slightly bigger for whatever reason, then I can scale that back down. So that makes it possible to get a perfect overlay and to really then immediately see what's actually different between these two documents. Another kind of mode that shows up for AEC customers, and this is one that happens in a particular workflow, specifically permit review, is where we have two documents at different scales, and we want to sort of show them in the middle normalized to the same scale. So unfortunately, I don't have a good example document here, so we'll kind of have to imagine it a little bit. But what might happen very often is that we might have a blueprint of a house that we're planning to build, and then we might have a blueprint of a city block where that house would actually be built. And as part of permit review, what we might do is overlay that blueprint of the house on top of the blueprint of the city block. And that way see if the house that we're planning to build will actually fit on the lot that we're building it on. So this is kind of a good sanity check to see. You definitely want whatever you're building to actually fit in the place where you're planning to build it. And so we have some tools that are geared towards that. We call that alignment mode. And in alignment mode, what you can do is draw an arrow on each of these two blueprints. So let me just get rid of that one, actually. Let me leave this one. So what we can do is draw an arrow on each. And then, so let's say this left one is a house that I'm building. And in the right here, this is maybe the city block in which we plan to build it. And maybe we plan to build the house in sort of this area here. So what I can do is draw a second arrow along here, sort of showing where that house would be built. And then in our alignment here, what we're going to have is the city block view with this house scaled down and sort of shown in that context. And so, again, my apologies, you have to sort of use your imagination a little bit with these documents, but you can imagine that this helps us see kind of each drawing in context and how they relate to each other at the correct scale. And that can, just as with the other measurement tools and the other tools that we're talking about, help make sure that everyone's on the same page, is building everything correctly, and that errors in construction are really minimized. Now, in addition to this, this graphical-based kind of comparison, we have some text-based comparisons as well. So let me go back to the demo here. And what I'm going to do is bring up some text-based documents. Here in our semantic text comparison, what we have are two versions of a text-based file. One where a lot of the things that we've written have been revised, and we'd like to sort of jump directly to those changes rather than wasting time trying to hunt through the document and see what might be different. There also tend to be workflows associated with these in some organizations. So maybe when you get a new copy of a document in, you might want to review it, for the purposes of looking for personally identifying information, GDPR violations, other sort of regulatory issues that might come up inside of the document. And so this text diff, this semantic comparison that we have here, it essentially creates an annotation for each of the text differences in the file. So every bit of text that's been removed shows up as a red highlight annotation, and the text that's been added shows up as a green highlight annotation. And how this document is structured is we've taken the 2 pages from these 2 versions and combined them into a new PDF file. So page 1 of this PDF file is the old version, page 1 from the old version, and then page 2 of the new file is page 1 from the new version, if that all makes sense. And what we're actually doing here is showing these in kind of a side-by-side double page view. And so that means that this same document you could use in another PDF viewer, for example, Acrobat or similar PDF viewing software, just by downloading this file and sending that to someone who's reliant on that tool. So it's a nicely kind of cross-platform way of presenting this diff. The other thing I really like about this interface is that since we have an annotation created for each of these, that means that automatically I can employ our annotation states for each of them and kind of drive a review and approval workflow for each of these changes. So for example,
Whoops. Looks like we lost Aaron there. Ah, here he is. He's back.
I was telling you that my connection was a bit troublesome there, so just did a bit of a refresh on the page. Hopefully everything is coming through clearly now. So my apologies for that bit of a blip there. So yeah, so we just took a look at our comparison. So next, what I'd like to do is kind of delve into our stamping capabilities. So let me reshare my screen here. So I'm just going to go back to our web viewer demo and kind of show off some of the stamping capabilities that we have built in and what can be done in terms of customizing that and making that closer to what your users might be expecting. So when we have our annotations, in addition to kind of the different shapes and highlights and so on that we can add to a document, if we click on Insert here, there are also quite a few stamps that we have built in. So similar to the annotation workflows that we saw previously, we have approval and rejection stamps, and these can be quite useful for the kinds of workflows that we were discussing previously. So review and approval workflow, or being able to look through a drawing and see if we should move forward with a particular design, or marking it as being confidential or sensitive, and so on. Now these are ones that we have built in just because based on user feedback, they're quite useful. They're also ones that we change based on the language as well. So with our internationalization, you can change these stamps to fit whatever language your end users need to make use of here within these stamps. And also you have the ability to customize these on your own as well. So we have the ability to simply create new stamps with whatever text you'd like to add. So like, we could say something like PII violation. So, if there is like a personally identifying information violation that's problematic in a piece of text or in a document, drawing, etc., then that's something that you can add in. And we have different values here that could be added to this stamp, such as the date and time dynamically generated and added in. So that makes it very easy to create an entirely new stamp. You can also create stamps from images. So that way, if there are some existing stamps that end users need to make use of, simply converting those into images would be one easy way of getting those loaded into WebViewer. And then within our APIs as well, we have a particular class called Stamper. And Stamper is sort of a general purpose class for adding new content onto a PDF page, whether that's an annotation or whether you're simply overlaying content. Stamper can stamp text, images, or even other PDF pages onto a PDF document. And it's that last use case that's really kind of interesting about Stamper, because what it enables is for you to take existing content and create new vector-based stamps out of them in PDFTron's technology stack. So for example, if you have an HTML file with a lot of existing stamps on them, what you could do is convert that into a PDF document and then crop down the page to just the stamp that you're looking for. And then you could use PDFTron's Stamper API to make a new stamp to create on the page. So it's quite a powerful mechanism, and one that we point a lot of customers to when they're looking for new ways to stamp content onto a page. So that's certainly something that a lot of our users make use of. Another kind of easy way of adding content onto the page is through our watermarking. So this comes up a lot in security contexts as well. Like if we have sensitive information that we want to restrict how it's shared, or just have a better idea of who might be leaking information, then our watermarks are a pretty useful way of doing that. So here we have just "Hello World" printed on there, but this could be something instead, like user information. So it could be my name, and here we have this timestamp at the top here in this watermark, and in terms of the actual code to make this happen, it's just a quite easy high-level API in JSON for adding this onto the page. This is very useful, again, as kind of a security measure. So that way, if the end user takes a screenshot of the document, or even maybe snaps a picture of the screen with a mobile device's camera, then you still have the information about who leaked this and what time that happened. And this is merged into the document when we download the file. So, technically speaking, it's kind of another way of stamping information onto the document. It's a bit more geared towards security type scenarios. Now, another kind of question that comes up a lot from our prospects is about different frameworks that WebViewer can be integrated within. And this is something that we've been paying a lot of attention to on our side, trying to make sure that if you're getting started with WebViewer, you're able to integrate it with whatever framework you might already have. So what we don't want is for any of our customers to have to rework whatever technology stack they're used to, or learn new languages, or anything like that that's going to slow down their development efforts. What we want to do is provide a toolkit that can be integrated with whatever technology stack you happen to have already, and can fit into whatever provider you're already integrated with. So in terms of different development frameworks, we have samples and guides for how to get started with a lot of different technology stacks. So if you're working with React or with Node.js or jQuery, whatever you happen to be reliant on, we have kind of pre-made samples, guides that walk through each step, and videos that walk you step by step through the process of getting started in those frameworks. And the same is true of our integrations as well. So if you're storing your documents on Salesforce or on SharePoint, we have detailed guides for exactly how to integrate WebViewer into those kinds of environments, and how to load documents from those providers. And our SharePoint integration is something that we're quite excited about, because we're able to embed WebViewer directly into a Lightning Web component. Because it's pure JavaScript, we can host it directly within SharePoint, or sorry, within Salesforce. So that's a solution that we're pointing a lot of customers to. And then the last thing I wanted to cover here today is PDFA conversion. I don't think we really have much of a demo here for PDFA here in WebViewer, but PDFA comes up quite often in some professional contexts, professional engineering contexts, because PDFA is an archiving standard that's in wider and wider use around the world. And in some jurisdictions, PDFA is required before the application of a digital professional engineering seal. What PDFA is a subset of the PDF standard that's geared towards archiving. It's kind of simplifying the document format. So it reduces the set of PDF features that might be used inside of the document, like the kinds of image formats that might be used when compressing images in the file, or the types of fonts that are used. For example, some PDFA specifications, like some of the variants of PDFA, outlaw certain kinds of fonts that are very PDF specific, like one in particular called Type 3 fonts, where each glyph in the font is made up of its own PDF page, which obviously couldn't really be easily ported to other file formats, and is something that's pretty complicated for rendering scenarios. So we offer our own PDFA conversion. That's something that we have built in all of our toolkits. It's available within WebViewer itself, and as well in our native toolkits. We support both the validation of PDFA files as well as conversion from PDF documents into various standards of PDFA. So if that's a requirement within your workflow, we would definitely recommend checking that out. So those are all the kinds of topics that I had slated to discuss today. Just looking to see if there's anything else we should cover.
No, I think that's pretty good, Aaron. We're a little bit over time here, so apologies for that. But I think you were able to cover everything. I answered some questions in the chat. So yeah, unless there's anything else from anyone, thanks very much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.